Hi everyone, I'm at Schroeder Amplification once again in Highland Park, Illinois. Today I'm checking out the Piega Coax 511. We did the review of the Piega Coax 311 a while back, and this is now the step up version. This is a floor standing speaker with the same ribbon, mid-range, and tweeter coax design. Same kind of woofers, but it also has two bass woofers and two passive radiators instead of a ported design like the 311 was. Tim and I have been planning this review, first listen, impression thing for a few weeks now, and it finally worked out just due to reschedules. And then as recently as yesterday, my car exploded. So I'm driving my wife's car, the Hello Kitty mobile, which brings me to today's sponsor. No, it's not Hello Kitty. It would be more like Hello Lawyer if I said something stupid like that. So let's get into my first impressions with the Piega Coax 511. So like I said, I've been to Tim's shop a few months ago to review the Piega Coax 311, which is the bookshelf model for the Coax series. On paper, the 311 and the 511 are incredibly similar, sharing a lot of the same technologies, and in fact, sharing the exact same coaxial ribbon driver that comprises the mid-range and tweeter. So the difference between these two really is the fact of one is floor standing, one's a bookshelf, one's ported, one has passive radiators, and one has two bass drivers and the other one only has one. Tim did inform me there are some crossover differences here, but the three-way principle with the crossover points themselves not changing at all between the two, with the bass driver rolling off at 600 Hz and the mid-range driver rolling off at 3500 Hz. With the second driver difference, the bass specification doesn't change much. The 311 boasting a bottom end of 35 Hz, while the 511 is boasting a bottom end of 32 Hz, only a 3 Hz difference. Connected to the 511 was a series of BAT electronics, including the BAT Rex 3 pre-amplifier that I had previously heard, as well as the BAT Rex 3 power amplifier that I had not heard previously to this. I'll also touch on what I thought the Rex 3 power amplifier in particular added to the listening experience a little later in the review. So seeing all the similarities between the 311 and the 511, I wasn't exactly sure what I expected the 511 to sound like. Maybe just the 311 but with a bit more bass, something like that. I think it is a little bit of a different speaker, and what the 511 really gave me was an extremely neutral, true to source kind of sound where I didn't feel like anything that Tim and I were listening to came off with any sort of coloration or flavor that wasn't in the original mix or wasn't meant to be there. There weren't things in the recording that were missing. There weren't things in the recording that were exaggerated. There are some speakers where you have an exaggerated sound of cymbals, or you maybe even have exaggerated bass or exaggerated sounds of the singer where their voice is just so beyond what's possible for the human voice to sound like if they were in the room with you, or maybe even smaller or laid back or more forward. You know, lots of positions and lots of different things you can do to the sound to make it sound a particular way. And the 511, I just never felt like it was trying to pull me in a direction that wasn't there in the first place. I played percussion in school, so I really am pretty keen on the sounds of drums. And I really just liked the way that the Piega was displaying drum kits throughout a myriad of different kind of genres and songs. The air, the feeling of the hi-hats and the cymbals just kind of reverberating there in the air, coming off with just the right amount of sparkle where it never felt fatiguing, but also never felt lacking. One of the things that was particularly interesting was a song that Tim picked out called May Later by Blake Mills. And in this song, they're playing a stand-up bass drum, which I played several times when I was in school. And hearing that just took me back to band class because it was so realistic. I was kind of waiting for like Miss Holt to start screaming, saying we were off key or something like that. Now, talking about the mid-range and the treble, I honestly think it was pretty much exactly the same as the 311. So if you want those impressions, I would go back to the 311 video and reference that. But what I would say is listening to that on the BAT Rex 3 power amp, this is where tubes, can't say I'm a tube person, but this is where tubes for me pose something very interesting. I can't explain why this is, and I don't want to just be very generic and say something like, oh, second harmonic noise that tubes generate, or euphonic distortion, whatever it may be. But particularly when we're listening to Harlequin Forest by Opeth, there's the part where Michael changes from his clean vocals to his guttural screams. And in that transition process, I felt like I heard Michael start to rev his scream up much earlier than I typically notice in that track. In my experience, particularly with very good tube amps, that kind of micro detail or advanced notice to certain cues or things that are happening in the song, things that may fall into the background if you're listening to a solid state system that I'm more familiar with, that's where tubes are kind of magical. And it was really cool to be familiar with the solid state pairing of the Piega from listening to the Bryston amps with the 311 and then listening to a pure tube signal with the 511 and seeing the detailed difference. Going back to my fundamental bass reference track, which is Into the Void by 9 Inch Nails, I'll listen to that track on every speaker and it will sound different. And on the 311, I could imagine with a solid state system or even the 511, it's going to have a more punchy sound to it, closer probably to like my Focal sound that I've got going on right now. The 511 and the Rex 3, that punchiness is subdued a little bit. It's still a very punchy bass, but it was so right sounding. I don't know how else to put this. It was just so right sounding. It sounded like if someone could program a drum to sound like that, that's the way they would program it, because that's the way it should sound. And it just kind of blew my mind that it produced this sound which is different from every other speaker that I've ever heard, but it's a sound that just makes you say, that's the way it's supposed to sound. And it's just crazy to me. So great speaker, great combination. Tim said he did play around with a few different electronic pairings, and this is the one that just clicked. And I have to say, I think he hit the nail on the head. And it goes to show Tim knows what he's talking about. It, like I said before, guy's a great mastering engineer. He's incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to anything music, and he's actually the #1 Piega dealer in the US now. And it goes to show, because the knowledge that he has with the music bleeds over into his ability to set this up properly, and it makes everyone happy. So those are my first impressions of the Piega Coax 511 powered by the Bad Electronics. Really impressive speaker overall. Big thanks to Shorter Amplification and Tim for having me out. Always a pleasure. Make sure you check his website in the link below, and also check out the links to help support the channel. Make sure you hit that thumbs up, subscribe. Really helps me out. I'll see you in the next one.